Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Today I have a really fun card making haul from Scrapbook.com. They sent over some brand new products from their new release and I thought it was super cool, so I'm going to share it with you guys and then we'll create some projects using some of the products. I'll have everything that I share in today's video linked down below so it's easy for you guys to find. I wanted to start off with these two stamp sets. These were really cool and they caught my eye. There's not many stamp sets with different Bible verses on them, and if you're of faith, these are some really awesome sets. So they've got some great encouraging Bible verses, which I think would be great for the outside of a card or even putting as the inside of the card as kind of your message to them to really encourage them. I'm always into encouragement cards. I think they're the best to send, and so these two stamp sets really fit the bill for that. For this next set, I love big chunky sentiments, and so this high fall stamp set really caught my eye. Just these two alone are really amazing. They're nice and large and kind of really chunky fonts, so you can use them as kind of a focal point on your card on a background. But then also, I love that you can pair it with this different script font and also all of these little sentiments down here. And of course, everything except for like this fall sentiment can really be used all year long, which I think is amazing. These Wildflowers are really awesome. It's a great large stamp set, so these are really going to fill an A2 size card really nicely, and I love the designs. They kind of almost give a fall look, but I think depending on how you color these flowers in, you can really use them all year long, and I think they're gonna make kind of a great background and images to color in. And then of course we've got some stencils. I thought these were super cool. So starting off with this Peppermint winter stencil, this has got a bunch of different detailed kind of snowflakes on there. I'm just imagining these with Lunar paste on them. I think they would look so stunning. And then we have Autumn Breeze, which is different pumpkins and leaves. This would be, again, gorgeous with Lunar pastes, but also if you like shift the stencil and kind of overlap the leaves, I think it could be beautiful. Last but not least, we have the Pumpkin Patch stencil. I was really drawn to this one because it's a layering stencil. You get to kind of do the pumpkins first, and then you can add the faces on top. So I'm definitely going to be using these on an example for today's video. All right, for my first card, I'm going to use the Pumpkin Patch stencil. I told you guys I was really drawn to this one, and I've cut down a card base and panel that we're going to use for a 5x7 card. I've never made a card this large before, so we're really embarking on new endeavors. All right, so I'll pull these guys out of the package, and we have two stencils. Like I said, this one is going to be just for the pumpkins, and this one has the different faces and also some little elements in between. So with this technique, usually I would put everything in the corner of my Misty tool, but I want this centered on my project. So what I'm going to end up doing is taking the Clearly Amazing mat. You can use any sticky mat, and I'm going to place my piece of cardstock kind of in the center here and stick it down. That's going to hold it in place in the center and then place my stencil exactly where I want it. And I'm actually going to line it up with the grid lines on here so that I know it's going to line in the exact same spot. And then I'll just stick the rest of the stencil down on the edges there, and everything's gonna be held in place nicely. And now that I think about it, actually, everything is held in place with this sticky mat, so I don't even need to use it inside the Misty. Starting off with a little bit of Guppy, which is my lighter orange color, and I'm gonna share how to do some shading. So I'm starting off here just by adding down my lightest tone, and I'm using the Ranger Domed Foam blending tools. I really like these because they're going to give you a really great saturation of color, but not give you any harsh marks, which we don't want on our project. Once we're done adding our color layer down, I want to add a bit of shading. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of Roar in my blending tool, and I'm going to bring this color in kind of the bottom edge of these pumpkins, and then lightly and softly blend it upwards. And there you get a really nice shaded effect. Just check out how easily these colors blend together. So I'm gonna actually go in on different sides for each pumpkin to give it a bit of variation and not make everyone totally the same. So here I'll go in from the top, and they just blend so smoothly together. It's one thing I love about my inks. They were formulated to really blend so nicely, and it really shows during a technique like this. By adding in two colors on the same layer, you really get a lot of depth and variation without having to layer up a bunch of different stencils for this look. So even though it's a layering stencil, don't be afraid to incorporate 2 or 3 colors on one layer to really bring it to life. All right, now with this sticky mat, I just peel this right off, and there we have our first layer all complete. And then we can bring in our second layer. Now I lined it up with the grid lines on this surface, so all I'm going to do is place it back down on the grids, and make sure everything lines up, and it's gonna line up seamlessly. All right, now I've got two options. I could go in with Shady or Weeping Willow, but I want to keep it warm because I'm gonna use a craft card base and keep it really warm toned. So I'm going in with this brown color, which is nice and dark. It's a super rich brown. And I can just go on the surface with my domed blending tool again and add this color in there. Look how rich that brown is. And so I'm avoiding the different sparkles and shapes in between. You could always mask and tape those off if you would like as well to make sure you don't get in those areas, but it's pretty easy to avoid using my blending tool. And I love these little faces. They're just so adorable. I love that each pumpkin has kind of a different face on it. They spent a lot of time kind of designing this and giving each pumpkin a little character. Now for the sparkles, I'm gonna grab a piece of plastic acetate and some Lunar paste in the slippery when wet gold color. Is just take my paste tool. This is from the paste tool set. A palette knife and just add some right down on the surface to create kind of a palette of the color. And a little bit goes a long way with this stuff. Then I'm going in with some domed blending foam. I'm going to dab this onto the surface and blend it right into those areas. You could also apply this down with a palette knife, but I like to do it with a blending tool like this because it's going to apply a really thin layer and it's gonna dry super quickly. So then we can lift this stencil off and check that out. You do want to make sure when you're using Lunar paste to clean everything thoroughly and quickly. So I'm just going to spray some water down on here and make sure that it's all cleaned up from my stencil. And then when it comes to your blending foam, you want to clean this out so that it doesn't harden in here. So what I do is I take a spray bottle and I mist this down with water and then I dab it off the surface. You just want to get it clean so that next time you use it, it's not crusty. When removing a background like this, I like to just bend it upwards and then it doesn't bend your cardstock and it removes super easily. And check that out. And in that time that we were cleaning, that Lunar paste has already dried and it's just so beautiful. Now when it comes to your sticky mat, if you get ink all over it, don't worry, just spray it down with a little bit of water and then use a paper towel or a lint-free cloth and go in and just wipe it down. You don't want to scrub and remove the adhesive, just gently wipe it off the surface. And since my inks don't stain, they should come off really easily. And now you're probably a little bit worried that you sprayed water on a sticky mat, but once all of that kind of evaporates off of the surface like this, it becomes really nice and sticky again. To store it, take your acetate sheet and then place it right down onto the mat, and that will keep any dust off for the next time you want to use it. Now let's finish off this card. I've cut the craft cardstock to 7 by 10, and this is going to make a 5 by 7 card base. So I'm going to score it down at 5 using my Teflon bone folder. And like I said, this is a first for me to make a card that's this big. But I love using craft cardstock for fall, so it's the perfect time to pull it out for a card base. And then I'll score it down, and there we have our card base. All right, now with this, to give it even a little bit more dimension and a little bit of a distressed look on the edges, I'm gonna take my card base and just take that foam blending tool and add just a little bit of that darker Weeping Willow color that we used. You don't need to do this, but it just gives it a nice kind of contrast to the edge. I'll use some tape runner on the back, and then we can add it right down onto our card. I looked around my craft room for the perfect sentiment, and I came across this Trick or Treat stamp set. I love this one. It's got a bunch of adorable little animals and critters in there. And then I love that Halloween stamp set down there. All right, I'm doing some embossing, so I'll use a little bit of anti-static powder tool to make sure the embossing powder doesn't go where I don't want it. And then I'll stamp this down using a little bit of Versamark clear sticky ink. Then we'll throw over a white heat embossing. I'll tap off the excess. And I also like to kind of lightly blow on it to make sure that any of the excess stray embossing powder kind of runs off the surface. If you flick it sometimes, too much embossing powder comes off. Then I'm gonna heat set this until it's nice and bright white. Now if we wanna match this to our project a little bit better, this is just regular brown cardstock. I'm gonna take that same Weeping Willow color and add this down. You're gonna see it just makes the cardstock color a little bit richer. The white heat embossing will just resist the ink, so we can totally change the color of cardstock we're working with. And if there's any excess on that white and it's not as bright, just go in with a cloth and then wipe off that surface and it'll return to a nice bright white sentiment. A super easy hack to make it kind of match your project. Then I'll bring in my favorite fussy cutting scissors. I'm gonna go in with the Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. I like to quickly cut around the sentiment and then I'll go back around and do more of a detailed cut. Now you could totally leave this on kind of a rectangle of cardstock, which is totally fine, but I like to just go around the sentiment, leaving a little bit of a border. I find that it gives kind of a more finished look with these rounded edges, and you're able to show more of the card design by cutting closer to the sentiment. And there we have our finished card. I love how this one turned out with the dimension that's on those pumpkins and those adorable little faces as well. It makes the perfect, adorable Halloween card. I got a question for you guys. Comment down below if you like to make more cutesy or more kind of spooky Halloween cards. I'm more in kind of the cutesy realm because when it gets a little too creepy, it's not up my alley. I have a super fun technique for this next card, but it involves me using some pixie spray on this stencil. You want to make sure to shake this up, and then I like to do this inside of a box. You could also take it outside if you want to, and just mist down that stencil. I don't use this too often, but it's just gonna make sure the stencil sticks down to the surface and adds a little bit of a tacky adhesive to the backside of the stencil. And now that I'm on the 5x7 card kick, I just can't stop. So I've cut down another large panel of black cardstock for a 5x7 card. And we're going to be using the Clearly Amazing mat as well. And again, I'll stick this right in the center. And I'm gonna place the side with the pixie spray that I used down onto the card so that it adheres to the surface. And this is just gonna make sure that these center portions don't kind of leak out and that they're nice and stuck down when we add down our mediums. You know what, I've changed my mind. I'm gonna move this Clearly Amazing mat out of the way, and I'm gonna bring in my double stick silicone mat, and I'll just place this right down on top. This is going to clean really easily from whatever we use. All right, now I'm using Lunar paste in the shades Roar, Shooting Star, and Slippery When Wet. And it's important to have a couple different shades in this instance because we're gonna get kind of a tie-dye effect. So starting off with the lightest Shooting Star, I'm gonna take my palette knife and just take this color and apply it down here and there all over the stencil. There's really not a ton of rhyme or reason to this technique. You just want to get enough of the paste down on the surface. Next, I'll move into Slippery When Wet, which is more of kind of a gold color. And I'll just add little globs here and there of this color. Again, right now it looks kind of like a hot mess, but it'll all come together in a second. Roar is gonna be my third color, and this is a really great, deep, rich, kind of pumpkin orange color, so I want quite a bit of this on the surface, so I'll just add a lot of this here and there all over the background. Now I'm going with my scraper tool, and there's 2 of these in the paste tool set. This tool is amazing for spreading out your pastes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it on kind of an angle like this, and I'm just going to spread it across the surface. And you get this beautiful sort of tie-dye effect, which is just gorgeous. Now the more that you blend it, the more blended together it's gonna get and less tie-dye. So but I'm just going to kind of fill in some of these smaller areas with paste, and you just want to kind of scrape over top of the surface to make sure that it smoothly blends. Right, then I'm going to lift this stencil off. There you can really see how easy it was to smooth out those colors and how much beautiful variation you get in those pumpkins with those 3 colors. So I'm gonna take any of the excess paste that was on our tool, and I'm just going to swipe this off to the side. Again, this tool is such a great way to get a nice smooth transfer of color like this. And there we have a really great background that once it's dry, we can die cut out of and get some beautiful effects. Then I'll spray down my mat. And the really awesome part, like I was saying about this silicone, is it wipes up just so easily from all of that paste, and it really cleans off nicely, even if the paste is a little bit dry on the surface. Let's check out how clean we can get that mat, and then we can move this off to the side. Just check out that gorgeous shine you get on these pumpkins once they're all completely dry. It's so amazing. For this card, I want to keep it super simple, just using the scripted thankful sentiment. So I've added this onto an acrylic block, and I'm going to stamp it down onto some black cardstock using some clear sticky Versamark ink. Then I'll throw over a layer of white embossing powder, and then I'll heat set that until it's bright white. I'm keeping this super simple, and I'm just gonna add this right over top of one of the pumpkins. What I love about this card is just that amazing shine, but we didn't have to use the faces. So it turned this more into kind of a fun fall card rather than being a spooky Halloween card. That's what I love about the versatility of using a layering stencil, is you don't have to use every layer. And this one is a great example of that. All right, now for our last card, I want to do a bit of masking. So I'm going to use the 4-inch mint masking tape. I love this stuff because it's a really nice big roll, and there's a lot in here, but it's a great thick masking tape that we can kind of cover a lot of the surface with. So here, I'm going to tape off half of the card, but in kind of a diagonal fashion like this, and then just kind of adhere it down onto our surface. And this isn't going to rip because it's a nice low tack tape. All right, I'm going for kind of a fall color palette, and I'm just going to bring in my color on the surface here. I'm starting off with a little bit of bee sting, and again, using the domed foam blending tools, blend my color up, and then I kind of blend it a little bit further than I want it, because that's going to overlap with the next color and blend them together really nicely. Next, I'll bring in Guppy, which is one of my favorite oranges. It's kind of an orangey yellow tone. So I'll kind of start on that line and blend them together and then go over top of that red. And look at just how beautifully those blend together and create kind of a new color in between. Next, I'm using this super bright shooting star color, one of my favorites. It really brightens up the card so beautifully. Then I'll bring in a little bit of Psych, which goes along really well with yellows, but also is kind of a nice transition into green tones up there. You know what? And I'm also going to add a little bit of Viper just to the top corner to kind of darken it up a little bit. And then to the bottom corner, I'm gonna add just a little bit of Game Over to darken it up down there and give kind of more of a maroon look. Check out that super clean and crisp line that we get, and it doesn't rip my cardstock one bit. I love that about the mint tape, and it just makes for such a nice one-layer card. Now I want to do some heat embossing, and even though these inks are dry to the touch, on the surface they might still be a little bit wet. So I'm going to go in with my Ranger heat tool and just heat set this to make sure that it's nice and dry. To finish off this card, I'm using the Wildflowers set, and I'm going to use this large floral cluster. Now to stamp this down, I don't want to mess it up, so I'm using my Misty stamping tool. I'm going to magnet my card base down, and then I'll grab the big floral cluster and kind of center it right onto my card. And I'm again going to kind of follow that angle a little bit with the design of the florals. Then I'll pick it up in my Misty. I'm gonna ink this up using a little bit of VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink. And then I will press this down. Give it some good pressure, and you know what? That transferred really nicely in one go, but it's nice to have the Misty in case you need to stamp twice. With this ink, it dries a little bit slower since it's a pigment ink, so I can throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder. You know, it's important to show my mistakes as well, so I accidentally got a little bit of heat embossing powder where I don't want it on top of those inks. It's because I didn't heat set the ink for long enough, and so it was still just a little bit wet on the surface. And so I'm going to brush this off with a dry paintbrush, and this is going to save it and make sure that those areas don't heat emboss. But if I were to do this again, I would just heat set it and then make sure to throw over a layer of embossing before I do my stamping, just to test if the ink is fully dry. Then we can go in and heat set this until it's clear and shiny. I love how the clear embossing powder really intensifies that black color. So I just realized I actually stamped this image upside down. I don't think it's too noticeable if I'm gonna be honest, but it definitely is supposed to go this way because the flowers are upright. So I did this on a card base. So all I need to do to fix it is just go in with my trimmer and trim it out. So this way I can add it to a new card base and make sure it's right side up. Like I mentioned, I love this high fall stamp set, and I love these big chunky sentiments. But today I wanted to make kind of a thankful for you card instead of love you. You could just take some mint tape, and this is a great life hack to just mask off the top sentiment, and then take your Versamark ink, and we can ink up the U. Then you're going to want to peel off that tape. Then we can stamp it right down onto our cardstock. And I'm doing some white heat embossing, so I'm stamping it down onto black. All right, then I'll throw over some white heat embossing powder, tap off the excess. To finish off this sentiment, I took two of the little sub words that say thankful for. I put them together on my acrylic block. That's why I love these acrylic blocks, because they have the lines to easily line up sentiments and make sure they're nice and straight. I'll stamp that down right above the U, and then we'll heat emboss it. All right, now again, I'm going to take my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors and just simply go around this sentiment and fussy cut it out again. All right, here's a look at that finished card. I love the masking we were able to do to add some interest, using that fall colors to create a gorgeous blend, and then finishing it off with those beautiful florals right on top. Alright you guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. Give it a big thumbs up and comment down below which card was your favorite. Also in the description box is a full supply list of everything that I use, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I'll see you guys soon. Have a great day. Bye!